The lights blaze, the cameras roll, and the air in the studio is charged with an energy that feels like a storm about to break. Viewers across the world are already on the edge of their seats because what is about to happen is not simply a political discussion. It is a collision of two powerful voices from opposite sides of the stage. In one corner stands Ben Shapiro, rapid-fire debater, armed with statistics, logic, and the speed of a machine gun in his words. In the other corner, Nigel Farage, the sharp and charismatic populist, famous for his firebrand style and ability to turn crowds into armies with a single phrase. No one expected calm tonight. This was set up to be explosive, and from the very first second it delivers. Shapiro wastes no time, his voice quick, sharp, electric. Nigel, you glorify sovereignty, you glorify nationalism. But here's the truth. Without freedom, sovereignty means nothing. Nations don't survive by closing doors. They survive by protecting liberty, by ensuring individual rights, by letting people thrive without being chained by government or populist rhetoric. You think slogans protect society? Number, ideas, freedom, truth. Those are the things that protect society. His tone slices through the air, his pace relentless, his rhythm hypnotic. Farage smirks, unshaken, and fires back with his booming, crowd-pleasing voice. Ben, that all sounds nice in theory, but let me ask you, what good is freedom if a nation cannot stand on its own 2 feet? What good are rights if sovereignty is surrendered to global elites, to foreign powers, to institutions that do not answer to the people? Freedom without sovereignty is weakness. Sovereignty is the shield, and without it, your freedom is a fantasy. His words echo with power, each syllable carrying the force of a rally, and the audience roars with reaction. Some cheering, others booing, the division instant and intense. Shapiro leans forward, his words firing faster. No, Nigel, sovereignty without freedom is nothing but tyranny under a different name. You can rap it in flags, you can sing anthems, but if people cannot speak, cannot live, cannot create without interference, then sovereignty is just control, and control is the enemy of liberty. The crowd erupts again, torn between applause and outrage, the studio shaking with the sound of clashing ideologies. Farage gestures broadly, his voice rising, his tone like a storm sweeping over the audience. And what you call liberty, Ben, is nothing but chaos when there is no anchor. A nation cannot be free if it is weak, if it cannot control its borders, if it cannot defend its culture, its traditions, its very existence. Sovereignty is not the enemy of freedom, it is the guarantee of it. His voice thunders, and the audience feels the air shift, the clash intensifying with every second. What began as a debate is already something more, something larger, something that feels like a battle for the soul of the modern world. The cameras capture every flicker of fire in their eyes, every spark in their words, as if history itself is being rewritten in real time. The energy in the studio has shifted from tension to raw fire, each man pressing harder, their words crashing together like waves in a storm. Ben Shapiro does not waste a breath, his sentences slicing through the heavy silence with relentless speed. Nigel, you keep repeating the same thing. Sovereignty, 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 as though the word itself is magic, as though waving a flag can solve a nation's problems. But sovereignty without freedom is nothing but nationalism chained to tyranny. What good is a border if the people inside are silenced? What good is a nation if its citizens cannot think, speak, or live freely? A cage painted in national colors is still a cage. His voice rattles the stage, his logic sharp, his intensity unbroken, and the crowd responds with bursts of applause mixed with outrage. Nigel Farage does not flinch. He raises his chin, his voice dropping low before booming back up like thunder rolling across the horizon. Ben, your obsession with abstract liberty blinds you to reality. A borderless world, an unchecked global order, the surrender of sovereignty to faceless elites. This is not freedom, this is decay. You speak as though rights can survive in a nation that cannot defend itself. But I tell you this, without sovereignty, rights are illusions. They vanish the moment another power takes control. His words sweep across the hall, carried on the energy of a man who has spent decades rallying crowds. The audience roars back, some chanting in support, others shaking their heads, the clash drawing them deeper into the storm. Shapiro strikes again, faster, sharper, his hands slicing the air as though carving his logic into stone. Sovereignty without principle is dangerous. Nations can close their borders. They can shut out the world. They can cling to identity. But without freedom, they become prisons. Look at history, Nigel. The most sovereign regimes were the most brutal, crushing dissent in the name of strength. Sovereignty does not guarantee liberty. It destroys it if unchecked. His voice rises to a pitch of urgency, as though the very future hangs on his words. Farage counters instantly, his tone fiery but controlled, carrying the cadence of a man who thrives on confrontation. And what about the chaos that comes when freedom is unmoored? When nations forget who they are, when tradition is sacrificed for ideology, when culture itself is erased in the name of liberty? That is not progress. It is collapse. Sovereignty is not the enemy of freedom. It is the anchor that prevents liberty from drifting into chaos. His words hit hard, shaking the audience, splitting the room in half. Some clap furiously, others hiss, but no one dares look away. The debate has become more than argument. It has become performance, theater, battle. Shapiro leans forward, his eyes blazing, his delivery unrelenting. Chaos comes not from liberty, but from oppression disguised as order. You cannot save a nation by silencing it. You cannot preserve culture by crushing individuality. Sovereignty is meaningless without liberty, Nigel. It is the wrapping paper without the gift inside. The crowd explodes. The moderator struggled to keep control, but the two men are beyond restraint. Their clash has become elemental. Fire against steel, liberty against sovereignty, two visions of the world colliding in a storm that feels unstoppable. The clash intensifies with each passing second, the studio vibrating with the weight of ideas that are no longer just spoken, but hurled like weapons. Ben Shapiro leans in, his rapid-fire delivery unstoppable, every sentence another strike of lightning across the hall. Nigel, sovereignty is not a shield against tyranny, it is a mask for it. You wave the banner of nationalism as though it protects liberty, but history proves otherwise. Regimes that claimed absolute sovereignty crushed freedom within their borders. They silenced dissent, they strangled innovation. They buried truth. Sovereignty is not inherently virtuous. It becomes dangerous when it stands without liberty to restrain it. And make no mistake, liberty is the lifeblood of civilization. His words come fast, pounding like a drumbeat, his voice charged with urgency, and the crowd murmurs in divided tones, some rising to applaud, others shaking their heads. Nigel Farage's face hardens, his jaw tightening before he erupts with the booming cadence of a man who knows how to command a crowd. Ben, you keep twisting history to suit your argument, but let's talk about the present. Look at nations that surrendered sovereignty in the name of liberty. Look at the bureaucrats in Brussels. Look at the chaos of unchecked globalization. Look at the erosion of identity and the hollowing out of democracy. Liberty without sovereignty leaves nations weak, vulnerable, and lost. Sovereignty is not the mask, it is the spine. Without it, liberty collapses under the weight of foreign control. His words thunder across the stage, the audience roaring back in approval, his populist fire striking chords deep in the hearts of those who feel betrayed by global institutions. Shapiro wastes no time, his voice even faster, sharper as though racing against the storm itself. Nigel, that is fear dressed up as strength. You talk about Brussels, you talk about elites, but sovereignty without liberty just hands power to a different set of elites, your own. The question is not whether a nation can stand alone, but whether its people can stand free. Liberty is not a gift granted by governments. It is a right that must be protected from governments. Yours, mine, anyone's. Sovereignty cannot replace that. His sentences spill out with such intensity that the moderator tries to cut in, but the roar of the crowd drowns him out. Farage raises a hand dramatically, his voice booming, his words dripping with fire. Ben, you live in a fantasy where liberty exists in a vacuum, but liberty must be defended by nations, by borders, by traditions. Without those, liberty is fragile, temporary, fleeting. The world is filled with wolves, and sovereignty is the wall that keeps them out. Tear down that wall in the name of abstract freedom, and you will not have liberty. You will have ruin. The audience gasps, the clash like thunder and lightning, two storms colliding. Shapiro shakes his head, his tone rising higher, his words delivered with the velocity of a storm surge. Ruin comes not from liberty, but from those who fear it. Wolves are not only outside, Nigel. They are inside. When a nation wraps itself in sovereignty, but denies freedom, the wolves are already ruling. The wall you praise is not keeping wolves out. It is keeping citizens locked in. The hall erupts into chaos, some clapping wildly, others shouting in protest, the debate spiraling into a frenzy of energy and conviction. This is no longer a discussion. It is an earthquake, shaking the foundations of ideology, rattling the very definition of freedom and sovereignty in the minds of all who watch. The studio feels like a battlefield now, the lights glaring down like unblinking eyes, the cameras capturing every flicker of rage, every twitch of defiance. Ben Shapiro's words spill like rapid fire, unrelenting, merciless, his tone carrying the urgency of a man who believes the fate of freedom hangs in the balance. Nigel, you talk about sovereignty as though it is a cure-all, as though it alone can heal nations. But sovereignty without liberty is just another form of oppression, another banner under which rulers tighten their grip. Look at the regimes that wrap themselves in flags, shouted about sovereignty, and then silenced every voice that dared to speak out. They were not guardians of liberty. They were its executioners. And that is the danger you refuse to see. His eyes blaze, his hands cutting through the air, his words charging the room with electricity. Nigel Farage answers with the booming authority of a man who has spent his life on stages, his voice rising and falling like a tide, carrying the audience with him. Ben, you love to cite history when it suits you, but you ignore reality. Nations that surrender sovereignty to faceless institutions do not remain free. They become subjects. Their people lose control, their culture fades, their laws are written by outsiders. Sovereignty is not oppression, it is ownership, self-determination, independence. Without it, liberty is a hollow slogan. You cannot be free if you are ruled by others. His words ripple through the crowd, igniting cheers, his cadence polished and powerful. Shapiro does not hesitate, his words erupting even faster, his tone cutting with surgical precision. Nigel, what you call self-determination becomes a tool for governments to silence their people. You pretend sovereignty means power for the people, but in practice it means power for those at the top. Liberty is not a slogan, it is the shield that protects citizens from every form of tyranny, whether foreign or domestic. Without liberty, sovereignty is meaningless. Without liberty, sovereignty is just chains painted in patriotic colors. The crowd erupts in divided noise, applause crashing against jeers, the studio alive with chaos. Farage raises his hand, commanding silence, his voice steady but fierce, dripping with conviction. And what happens, Ben, when liberty tears a nation apart? When the absence of borders floods communities? When unchecked freedom erases identity? When traditions are discarded like garbage? What you call liberty becomes anarchy. Sovereignty is not chains, it is roots. It grounds a nation. It protects its culture. It gives its people a foundation. Without it, liberty is not a shield. It is a sword that cuts down the very society it claims to defend. The hall shakes with applause and outrage. The clash no longer just about principles, but about visions of survival. Shapiro leans forward, his tone now almost prophetic, his words spilling like a storm. No, Nigel. Anarchy comes from those who try to smother liberty, who fear the voices of their own citizens, who call dissent chaos and call control order. True roots are found in free people, not in rulers clutching sovereignty like a weapon. Liberty is dangerous, yes, but it is also the only path to progress. Sovereignty without liberty is not roots, it is rot. The words reverberate through the hall like thunder. The audience gasping, divided, electrified. The storm has reached its peak. Two titans locked in a struggle so fierce, it feels as though the very walls are shaking, and still neither man will back down. The clash has reached its breaking point. The studio trembling as though the very walls can no longer contain the storm. The audience sits frozen, eyes wide, breath shallow, caught between two visions of the world that cannot coexist. Ben Shapiro leans forward, his voice sharp and urgent, his words delivered with the speed of a man racing against time. Nigel, you stand here defending sovereignty as though it is sacred. But sovereignty without liberty is the fastest road to tyranny. It is not freedom when governments crush speech in the name of strength. It is not freedom when leaders silence dissent and wrap it in a flag. That is not sovereignty. That is oppression repackaged as patriotism. And the truth is this: liberty is not perfect. Liberty is not safe. But liberty is the only condition under which humanity can truly thrive. Strip it away, and sovereignty becomes nothing but a prison with a national anthem playing in the background. His words slice through the air, his pace unrelenting, his tone electrifying, and the crowd erupts in a mix of cheers and gasps, some nodding fiercely, others shaking their heads in protest. Nigel Farage steps forward, his face burning with intensity, his voice booming so loudly it shakes the floor. Ben, your rhetoric is clever, but it is empty. Liberty cannot survive without sovereignty. You speak as though flags and borders are meaningless, but they are the very shield that protects liberty from being devoured by outsiders, by chaos, by forces beyond our control. Sovereignty is not the enemy of freedom. It is its protector. Without it, liberty is fragile, vulnerable, doomed to collapse. You claim to defend freedom, but in truth, your vision leaves nations defenseless, rootless, and lost. His words roll through the studio like a thunderclap, drawing wild applause from his supporters. The two men lock eyes, neither yielding, their voices overlapping as though even the moderators have lost control. Shapiro snaps back, faster, sharper, a torrent of logic. And what of the people trapped inside sovereign nations that strangle liberty, Nigel? What of citizens who cannot speak, cannot worship, cannot live without fear? Are they free because their leaders shout sovereignty from the rooftops? Number, they are prisoners. Sovereignty without liberty is a coffin, and liberty without sovereignty may be fragile, but it is alive. It breathes, it creates, it builds. The future belongs to liberty, not to the chains of nationalism dressed as pride. The crowd gasps again, the energy boiling over, the tension unbearable. Farage slams the podium with his hand, his voice rising one last time. And what of nations that tear themselves apart in the name of liberty? What of societies that collapse because they forget their roots, because they abandon tradition, because they let ideology erase identity? That is not freedom, that is destruction. Sovereignty is the anchor. Sovereignty is the spine. Sovereignty is survival. Without it, liberty burns itself out. The two men stand locked in a battle of words, their visions irreconcilable, their conviction unshakable. The audience roars, divided down the middle, some chanting Shapiro's name, others cheering for Farage. The noise so deafening it feels like the roof might come down. The cameras zoom in for the final shots. Two faces carved in fire and steel, two voices that have shaken the room and the world beyond it. As the debate closes, there is no handshake, no reconciliation, only the haunting silence after the storm. Viewers everywhere are left with the same question, echoing in their minds long after the broadcast fades to black. Will the future belong to liberty, or will it be claimed by sovereignty?